Okay, we'll get started. So first off, thanks for joining the first of many 2020 forums. First off, I'd like to welcome everyone and say Happy New Year. I think we still can say Happy New Year. I think there's a 2 or 3 month time frame where you can wish everybody Happy New Year. So Happy New Year. We kicked this off about a year ago last year, and the membership has gone above and beyond what we expected. We're well over 420 members, and we just continue to get new members daily. And so, thank you so much for being part of the community and just being part of the forum here. A couple things before we dive into the speakers. One is a reminder that you are all on mute. When we get to Q&A, if you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. I'll unmute you. You can ask the question, and I'll put you back on mute. To kick things off, we have Phil Armstrong. He is a CIO at Great Westlife. He's also part of the TBM Council as one of the board members. And then we have Megan. Megan has been in the TBM space for many, many years. I'll let them do more of a deep dive in regards to their background as we get started here. If you want to ask a question on Zoom, there's 3 ways to do it. One is you can just type in the question in the Q&A widget. Another option you have is you can just type the question in chat. And the third way is go ahead and just raise your hand. Like as I mentioned before, I'll go ahead and I'll unmute you, and you can ask the question. The speakers will talk for about 20 minutes, and we'll have about 5 minutes for Q&A. So with that said, I'm going to go and unmute Mr. Phil. And take it away, Phil.
Tim. Great. Thanks very much, Tim. Appreciate it. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak with the group today. I've got about 20-25 minutes to summarize what's been a frenetic 4-year journey. So apologies if I talk a little fast. I want to get everything in. I'd like to take you through our TBM Apptio journey here at Great Westlife, but I'm going to do it more from an executive level view. I'm certainly not a practitioner. I understand TBM and Apptio in detail, but I'd like to keep my comments fairly high level today, if that's okay. Next slide, please. Let me start by saying that probably not many of you are aware of who Great Westlife is. You're not familiar with our brand, and that's because we're a holding company for some very well-known brands. We're a large financial services company managing about $1.6 trillion of assets under management, with approximately about 24,000 staff globally. And we operate primarily in the US, Canada, the UK, Ireland, and Germany. We were founded in 1847, so well over 170 years ago, in Canada, and that's 20 years before the existence of Canada as a country. We operate across 4 primary brands, which you can see on the page today: Canada Life in Canada, the UK, and Germany; Irish Life in Ireland; Empower Retirement, which is the second largest pension administrator in the US, out of Denver; and Putnam Investments out of Boston. And that beautiful building on the right there that you see on the slide is where I'm joining you from today. Next slide, please. And if you'll permit me just a few seconds, I'll do a quick introduction. So as Tim mentioned, my name is Phil Armstrong. I'm the EVP and Global CIO of Lifeco. I was born in England and moved to Canada in my 20s, and I've called Toronto home for over 30 years now. I started as a programmer, and I've worked in technology, mainly in financial services and capital markets, for the last 43 years across 49 different countries. As Tim mentioned, I'm a board member of the TBM Council, and that's me on the top row there on the council website. That's also me on the right. I'm the one in the black cup talking to Pepper in Montreal Airport. And I always get told to say this because I have to make reference to the fact that I'm wearing a backpack in this particular photograph, and I am not afflicted with the dreaded Quasimodo-IT hump syndrome. Next slide, please. to the meat of the presentation. Lifeco's TBM journey started in late 2016, early 2017. And this was through a need to better control our IT expenses and have more transparency into those expenses and those chargeback rates. We spend about $1.5 billion annually on IT services. We needed to be more responsive, and we certainly needed to rope in inappropriate shadow IT. In 2017, we rolled out Aptio's IT planning, cost transparency, and bill of IT across Canada all in 1 year. And we established a TBM office and had strong sponsors for this initiative in both myself and the global and Canadian CFOs. This was absolutely key. Strong sponsorship for a transformation like this is essential. In 2018, we aligned to the Atom model, ingested cloud consumption, tracked licensing, and set standards. The TBM office ramped up and went into heavy operations and education mode. Well, we underestimated the need for education, the desire for self-service, and internal demand for TBM benefits and access. In 2019, we expanded cloud coverage and our rollout of Office 365 and OneDrive. We provided labor, vendor, and project costs, and we regrouped our results into run, grow, and transform views, and became eerily accurate in our expense forecasts. Oh, and we also rolled out TBM to our European operations. The businesses were loving the quick responses to their questions and the ability to use financial information to guide their business, platform, and product decisions. In 2018-2019, our rapid adoption overwhelmed the TBM office, and we dealt this in a rather unique and award-winning way, which I'll share with you later in the deck. This year, 2020, it's about continuing the rollout across the US and providing platform views. So a combination of infrastructure, labor, and apps. How much does this platform or service really cost us to run? Are these products that are running on these platforms really profitable? And are they strategic to our business? Should we divest, re-platform, or double down? TBM is helping us become laser focused on profitable and strategic endeavors and not what I would call majoring in minor things. Our modeling and forecasting abilities have matured, and our business relationships based on trust and value have been significantly strengthened and elevated. Next slide. I won't dwell too much on this slide, but this is our journey from concept to value and continuous improvement. We started in Canada and then repeated this cycle in each country across our enterprise. Sponsorship, education, and cultural change were by far the biggest factors in our success. The last column denotes continuous improvement, continuous refinement. Consumption for TBM services is up, and we know we have to be responsive, agile, and constantly providing value. Next slide. So what value have we delivered today? What are we seeing? Well, we've eliminated 300 plus spreadsheets in the budgeting process alone, over 500 spreadsheets in total across the enterprise. We've increased our automated reporting process efficiency by chopping the time in half. And we've introduced one source of truth. We've added powerful online ad hoc self-service capabilities. We were skeptical whether people would use these instead of just relying on the traditional reports they normally get. but we've been pleasantly surprised to see the adoption rate of people finding out their own answers and digging into their own costs. Cost transparency has built trust and focused our conversations on the bill of IT, consumption patterns, facts, and numbers, and moved us away from those cheap shot comments and gut feels. We've all heard them. I feel like it's a bit too expensive. Based on what? We feel better equipped to support a hybrid multi-cloud strategy and show the true costs of moving to the cloud. We've armed our teams with facts and accurate modeling to make informed decisions, informed business decisions. Next slide. We've been landing very complicated, large-scale business division budgets to within about plus or minus 2%. This was unheard of. TBM has helped us accurately frame two significant divestitures. I don't think we would have done this without the certainty of our costs and our profitability forecasts. It's all provided by TBM. We built trust. We can now show true costs and true ROIs. This has impacted our product decisions, our platform decisions, and our housing decisions, whether we want to keep things, assets in our data centers, or move them to the cloud based on a profitability model. Next slide. We severely underestimated the response to TBM and Aptio, and our TBM office was overwhelmed. To help with adoption and to make effective use of the TBM office and our subject matter experts, we devised a persona-based model, recognizing that different roles want different things. They come at this problem from different angles. So we created 7 different personas across our organization. We also created customized training, reports, packages, and views for each persona. So the next 2 slides show you the types of personas that we came up with. You can see some comments that we took from the interviews when we're creating these personas. And just the difference in the information that these personas wanted from TBM and from our TBM office. So we created personas such as executive leaders, senior leaders, and finance leaders. Next slide. Oh, there we go. Infrastructure and operations leaders, application services and product owners, planning and enablement people, and vendor management people, all coming at the same problem from a different angle. This really helps with our rapid training and adoption capabilities. And in the next slide, which we're not going to just yet, I included a sample persona card. So the reason why we did these personas and these definitions was to keep the TBM office sane and to increase their throughput and effectiveness. We've seen massive efficiencies through reuse and standardization. And even though these packages, these views, these standardization have been widely used and rolled out across our company, we still find people going into the product, going into the model, and availing themselves of all the powerful, rich capabilities and self-service capabilities. Next slide. This is what a persona card looks like in our organization. So we picked on the app services and product owners card, and in there we talk about who are these types of people, what sort of job descriptions and roles do they have in our organization, what do they do for a living, and how do they typically show up when they're wanting to interact with TBM. What does TBM do for them? How does it help them? And so we've created this card that defines who they are And it allows us then to target our education, to target reports, standard views, and in the box on the right there is a quick comment which really disguises a lot of hard work around the metrics we want to surface for these people, the standard reports and views, and our targeted training. So that's how we've kept the TBM office nice and sane. Next slide. Now, our goals around TBM and implementing Aptio initially were pretty simple. As always, it's the execution that's fraught with danger. We wanted to build the budget, manage costs, set rates, and have a billing and recovery methodology that came from one source of truth and was trusted. And we wanted to do this in a transparent and efficient way. How hard could it be? Well, when you're dealing with a large organization in different time zones with different individuals with different motivations, I can tell you, it can be pretty hard. It's very, very complex. Fortunately, if you do these 4 steps right, you can use the results to move the conversations more from tactical conversations and gut feels to strategic discussions that center around value. So we eliminated these gut feelings, these personal preferences, and these armchair technologies taking cheap shots. And we've moved the conversation now to a fact-based, value-based discussion, which I like. I like that a lot. It actually provides us with better informed decisions. Next slide. And we must be doing something right. This is my IT CFO in the red dress on the right, accepting a TBM award for our innovation and our use of personas in Vegas. I'm the proud guy on the left, again, looking like I'm wearing some type of white NASA jetpack strapped to my back. I don't know what it is about me and photographs. I just seem to have some type of backpack. But anyway, thank you for your time today. I really hope that this has been inspirational. I hope that it has inspired you to start or at least continue with your TBM journey. You know, I've been part of this journey from the start, and I've watched the team work really hard as we've rolled this out across Lifeco. Our chargeback capabilities are immensely complex. There was massive distrust in the numbers, the value, and the messages coming back from IT to the businesses. Since we've rolled out TBM and Aptio, that trust factor is at an all-time high. It does sound a bit cliche-ish, doesn't it? But you really have to look at the conversations that are now happening as they dig into their bill of IT, talk about options for reducing costs or increasing investments, looking at how much we're spending on running the business, growing the business, and transforming the business. And then relating those positions to our products and services and getting more pointed around what's strategic and what's profitable. It's a business enablement tool. And I think as there is more emphasis on costs and making your dollar stretch, TBM has really positioned us to be in a good position to make fact-based decisions. We're future-proofing our business. We're making sure that we operate in the products and the services and the theaters that are best suited to our organization and our customers, and that we can be as efficient and as profitable as possible. I really like this quote from one of the TBM board members. He said to me when I first joined the TBM Council as a board member, you know, Phil, TBM is like Kung Fu for IT executives. And I chuckled and walked away and thought about that, but it really is. As our businesses shape and move and grow, you need something to anchor towards where you've got a set of constants, where you can be measuring against not only yourself, but peer groups. and understand how are we doing? Are we profitable? Are we making the right decisions? And are we actually using data and facts to drive the company forward and not just gut feels and sometimes misguided experience? So that's our story. It's been a success at Lifeco, but we're not resting on our laurels. I think on one diagram I showed continuous improvement, and we will continue to evolve TBM and our usage of Aptio right across Lifeco. Thank you for your time today. Over to you, Tim.
Outstanding. Thank you again for presenting. So if you have a question, feel free to pop the question into the chat box. Feel free to raise your hand or put it into the Q&A box. I'll have Chad kick off the first question.
Thank you, Tim. This is Chad DeWaren. Phil, thank you very much for your presentation. Very interesting walkthrough in your storyline behind TBM. Early on, you mentioned and emphasized that stakeholder support was really critical to your success. Any lessons learned or insights for the group in terms of how you garnered that stakeholder support for your program?
At the top of the house, I was the program sponsor, the global CIO, and I really needed to align with the global CFO. A few comments around some experiences that we'd had around multiple sources of the truth and not being able to get answers quickly convinced the CFO, the global CFO, that this was worth doing. Simple questions like how much are we spending on platforms, or how is the profitability, the real profitability of these products, we couldn't answer. And so I got executive support to move along this journey pretty quickly. I think where it really came down to the rubber hitting the road was second line down and third line down, where you had finance people or IT people that had done things a certain way for a long time and were just really not willing to change. And so exerting a bit of pressure on them or explaining to them the goals of what we're collectively trying to achieve, and then demoing the system and the capabilities, the difference between the old way and the new way, the responsiveness between the old way and the new way, you can win people over very quickly. But getting the impetus and the momentum to start the project is tough, because there's an investment and a leap of faith. And I think that really comes down to a couple of executives lining up behind this and saying, we believe we can make a big difference here.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another question for you here. In regards to your data being clean or not, was that something that you took into account prior to the journey?
Fantastic question. I'm not going to lie. Our data, as we say up north, our data was terrible. The data quality was not in good shape. Another reason why we set off on this journey in the first place. We wanted the one source of truth. We had to spend quite a bit of time cleaning up the data, reconciling. I wouldn't say that we fell into the trap of getting totally clean data before we started the initiative. I don't recommend that. I think you have to clean it up, organize it, get it into the tool and the methodology and the taxonomy, and clean up as you go as well. Otherwise, it's a journey that's just going to get delayed and delayed. So we did run into some data quality issues, and we worked our way through them. We set that expectation right up front, though, with the finance and business leaders, saying that our data had some uncleanliness and that we will work our way through it.
Terrific. Okay, last question here. Besides cost metrics, what other metrics are you driving or you're reviewing with your service owners and your personas on whether it's a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis? Are you looking at metrics like quality metrics, risk?
No, we have a separate system that measures risk. Quality, yes. Costs, responsiveness. We're getting into projects now, to project initiatives and metrics. Adherence, compliance, financial adherence, compliance metrics. and just moving into value now too. So if we have business cases, we're plopping those into the model and making sure that, we're pretty good at prioritizing and costing out our business cases. We're pretty good at tracking the cost all the way through them. And we weren't as good at looping back afterwards and making sure that we captured the ROI that was in the business case. And so we're just starting to get a bit better at closing off the business case. And sometimes it's 6 months, a year after that those sales did actually show up, or that those headcounts were reduced. So we're doing full life cycle on our business initiatives now and using TBM to track that.
Great. Well, Phil, thank you so much. Terrific presentation, and really appreciate your ability to be able to present today and provide us the background. So with that said, I'll switch over. Yep, I'll switch over to Megan. Megan, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Tim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, and we can see your slides.
Excellent. So my name is Megan Sikora. I'll give you a little more background about myself. Today I'm going to talk about my journey. It's going to be a little bit different than Phil's perspective. I'm going to tell it actually from an implementer perspective as a human being implementing TBM and the things that you go through and the lessons you learned as you go through your journey. I titled my slide That Business Magic. That'll come back up a little bit later in my slide deck. So again, my name is Megan Sikora. I'm currently a TBM Senior Manager with Copper River Enterprise Services. We're a consultant to the government. We're an Alaskan tribally owned company. I myself worked within the federal government for 16 years, and that is where I started my TBM journey. So I did it for, I've been doing TBM for just under 4 years. Previous to my current role, I worked at General Services Administration, and during that time there, I sat on the TBM Standards Council or committee for 2 years, and that is the committee that sits underneath the TBM Council and advises on the taxonomy, value plans, and things like that. I'm a certified TBM executive, PMP, TOGAF, all that sort of stuff. And prior to actually doing TBM, I've done enterprise architecture, project management, IT governance, financial reporting, done a whole slew of sort of IT oversight positions. So when I started my journey, I came in as a director overseeing a group that did the IT budgeting, capital planning. And when I was talking a lot to executives, I sort of felt like Lucy here with the budget therapy. People were always coming to me complaining about how their budgets were cut, how they never get enough money for IT functions, how they can never upgrade because they just can't get the money to invest, how they can't innovate, things like that. And there's not a lot you can do from that position. I definitely heard the same thing coming from the CFO side of the house and the business side of the house. As Phil mentioned earlier, IT is too expensive. I'm not sure what I'm getting. And every time I start my TBM journey, so, I've moved on into the private sector advising on TBM, I really feel like every new engagement, chapter 1 repeats itself. Always sitting there, listening to people's problems, trying to understand a little bit more of the environment, but the same story continually comes through. Now, depending on where you are and the maturity level of your environment, it might be different, but a lot of the stories are the same. So a lot of times I would call it the turf war. You would sit in your budget meetings, IT be on one side, the business lines are on the other. Like I mentioned before, IT is always saying that we're getting asked to do more for less, while the business lines are saying it's too expensive and they don't understand what they're getting billed for. Now, this environment's going to vary depending where you're from. So like I said, I've been in the federal space for a number of years. Budget is done very differently there than it is in the private sector. So one of the things that I'll talk about as I go through this is a little bit about what the federal environment is like, just so everyone on the phone understands the point of view that I'm coming from. So when I was thinking about my journey, this is one of the books that I had read back when I was in school, learning a little bit about this. And one of the things that came up was sort of the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And I really see that in the IT environments, whether it's on your own individual team or in an IT environment as a whole. What you'll see, or in an organization as a whole, you'll see that IT is not trusted from the business lines, and there's an internal lack of trust. And this is where TBM can really help come in and solve a lot of those issues. The fear of conflict, people don't, resolutions don't come about. The commitment. Even when you're trying to get a TBM environment up and running, this one's where I saw like the hardest part. You might have commitment from your executives, but when it comes down to the people who are actually running the IT environment, you're asking them for numbers and they're trying to keep your data centers up and running. And so they see a little bit of a conflict with them themselves. And then the accountability piece comes in too, where you see a lot of folks saying, well, that's not my data, or that's not, my problem. And one of the things that I discovered in my journey is that people would say that my TBM data is wrong. And part of that is a communication and saying, like, it's not TBM data, it's your data just shown through the TBM framework. I think that this is something that we had to work through on my team when we were starting to implement. The other thing that we started seeing a lot of was the data overload. So when I started my journey, I definitely felt like I was alone, even though there is a huge TBM community out there. The federal environment's very different, and that even differs from some of the other public sector areas. We dealt with things like colors of money, and what that means is every year is different. You're going to have different fiscal years. Sometimes the money turns into the pumpkin at the end of the year if you don't use it. Some things are 2-year appropriations, 3 years appropriations, and so all those things matter. So what color of money you use is very important. And executives also look at money a little bit differently in the federal space as to when the money is contracted as opposed to when the money is actually spent. So you're looking at things from what they call an obligation point of view, when the money is contracted out, versus when you're receiving those invoices and what you're actually paying for IT. So we were having some trouble trying to find some counterparts who were used to the environment that we were in. And one of the things that was also difficult during ours is every report was sort of met with skepticism, so I have the little laser sharks into the corner. When I came in, a POC, proof of concept, had already been started, and they had successful results from that. When we were starting to implement at a larger scale, putting our entire IT budget into the system and looking at our costs and trying to map it to the taxonomy, we ran into some bad mappings, basically. Our spreadsheets were more trustworthy than what was going into our TBM reports. Part of that had to do with the assumptions that we made on coding, and our coding was better in our own spreadsheet as opposed to the financial system. It was just too broad in the financial system, and we had much more granular stuff. So we weren't really getting the buy-in that we needed moving from our proof of concept to an actual implementation. So that leads me to what I like to call the Chapter 2, Take 2, Redo. You've always seen the iceberg reference. I was recently in New Zealand, so this is a picture that I took on my iPhone. But you only see 10% of what's actually there. There's always a bunch more underneath. Now, I had just talked about data overload. One of the problems that we had is that we were taking in all those different pieces of data that we could use, but we didn't really have a use case in mind. So one of the things that I found really, really important during our journey is, one, not to be afraid to start over. This is a concept people use in Agile all the time, but it is funny when you run into it and you actually do need to pretty much toss everything out and not just go back like one iteration. People are very afraid to do that. But for us, this made us move faster and forward better in our second implementation. One of the things that I also found key when I was moving through sort of my secondary implementation was really talking about TBM as an effective piece of communication. It's not just the taxonomy. A lot of times we focus on the taxonomy a lot, and it's great, but that's just your common language. There's a framework that goes behind this. And so one of the things that I always liked to do was talk about, communication, using analogies such as this one. When we go to the optometrist, which view is better? It's going to vary by person. So we have our finance view, our IT view, and our services view. That really helped us gain some more buy-in, especially with our CFO. And one of the things that we also wanted to talk about, and Phil hit on this as well, is IT decisions based on data and not feelings. You always run into the people who say, I feel it is too expensive, as opposed to I know it is. And the other thing is I want to mention is not overselling TBM. So once people get an idea of what it is, they have all these ideas and they want those implemented immediately. And the thing is if you don't have great data, which most people don't, you're not going to be able to get to that, best case scenario use case. So a lot of this is also about, letting people know what you can start with and then how you can progress and move forward in implementing. And the other piece was, don't do TBM for TBM's sake. I think if you go into a situation and you say, hey, I'm just implementing TBM and you don't really sell the value of it and why you're actually doing it, TBM will become more of a 4-letter word as opposed to a 3-letter word. So, like I had mentioned before, we really didn't have this end goal in mind. We knew we wanted transparency, but that's not exactly a use case. One of the things that I, spoke about with my executives is if we don't have a determination of what our use cases are, we really don't know where we're going in the end. And I like to use the analogy of going on travel. So saying I'm going to implement TBM for transparency is kind of like saying I'm going to go on a trip, pack your bags. Okay, I don't know where I'm going. How should I pack my bags? What you're going to end up doing is overpacking because you want to pack for every scenario. So what I pack for Alaska is going to vary much differently than what I would pack for somewhere like Ecuador. And determining your use cases is really something you need to work with your executives plus the folks who are on the ground and who will be utilizing the reports. So it goes back to the what's in it for me use case scenarios. So in my journey, we did that. We developed our use cases, and we got some great executive buy-in from not only our CIO, but all of our associate CIOs, and we knew where to move forward next. That's what leads me to chapter 3. So we went through a quick 60-day sprint on one of our use cases, and at the end of it, we got varying results. We got some really good stuff, wow, we really need to show this to the customer, this is amazing, as opposed to the yes, but always follows with something, or that isn't right, or just some people being a little bit confused from what they saw. So one of the things that came out of that is that you really have to ensure not only agreement on what your use case is, but agreement on what the goal of that use case is. So in our case, we had an agreement on a unified use case. We had a great plan built out, had our data requirements. We extended our TBM team, so we had data owners from the various places that we needed to gather data from, a timeline, a roadmap, check-ins, all of that went well. The result, we achieved the use case. Like I had mentioned, we had buy-in, we had good communication. We identified some really great process improvements that came out of this. So, one of the things Phil had mentioned, one of the questions on the Q&A is that, the data wasn't great in some cases, but there was opportunity to improve it. So we definitely had a lot of those that we ran into, finding hey, this SOP needs to be updated or it needs to be followed a little bit better. And we really established some processes to make the data gathering requirement repeatable. What didn't work, of course, unplanned work came up. There really wasn't an agreement to what success was. So like I had mentioned before, if you've gone through a TBM journey, you understand that there's assumptive-based allocations, there's consumptive-based allocations, but we don't always have consumptive data. So sometimes we have to rely on attribute-based or assumption-based to allocate our money throughout the model. But that's not going to be perfect for everyone. Everyone had a vision of what they thought the report should be or what data should be in it. So the expectations were running really high. Meanwhile, we couldn't meet those expectations because the data either just wasn't there or we didn't have enough time to find a way to gather that data. So my little, moral of the story here is not only should you plan everything out, but also agree on how you're going to utilize those reports once they've been made. Are they going to be used in, executive decision-making meetings, or are they something that, will be reviewed monthly? Having that sort of established routine on how these reports are going to be used is really going to be helpful in your TBM journey. So the other thing that I wanted to say, and this came up after our sprint, people just expected magic to come out of these reports. I'm not quite sure where that magic was supposed to come from. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, but unfortunately I don't have magic. And one of the quotes that actually came out after our sprint was, TBM does not automatically give you the answers. This is going to require a lot of data from your teams. It's going to require, folks jumping on board and helping you out. So not just the folks who are implementing TBM in your office, but also the folks who are in operations, security, wherever you need to pull data from. And then, of course, focusing on those use cases. And the unicorn actually also came about because one of my team members, I asked them, if you had to choose a mascot for our team, what would it be? And they chose the unicorn because they thought that at that point, they felt like TBM was this mythical creature that was never going to exist because of the heightened expectations that were out there. So really ensure that you're communicating what people are actually going to get. So just kind of going through that real quick, defining your success for each iteration, build out your TBMO to include folks from outside your TBMO. So those are including your executive sponsors, folks from operations, security, finance, wherever you need to pull data from. Do things agilely, build upon your lessons learned. So build upon the sprints, don't try to boil the ocean. Don't jump all in and say, I want consumptive based for everything because it's going to take you forever to implement. And really gain and buy in that accountability and strategy and really develop that vision for TBM. These are all things that I think you can find on TBM Connect, as well as other things that are out there. There's a ton of information about how to mature your TBM implementation, and that's really comes from a lot of the folks in the community who have helped put this together. And then, of course, obviously, webinars like this are extremely helpful. So just in closing, I like to make up different acronyms for TBM, and it really came about because someone who I was bothering for data called me that bossy Meg is what TBM stood for. But you really want to make TBM that business magic versus that big mistake. You want to make sure your first implementation goes well and really, has a success story, kind of like Great Westlife had. And with that, of course, no journey really comes to an end. My journey continues, and hopefully I'll get more lessons learned that I can share with communities as I go along.
Outstanding. Thanks, Megan. That was awesome. I'll go to some questions here. First one is, how did you initially create your service portfolio?
So, in my experience where I was previously, we didn't necessarily have a service portfolio. We had like the services that you could get from the help desk, but we definitely used the TBM taxonomy to start building the service portfolio out. So, the TBM taxonomy really is just at the high level, but then, we really kind of built upon that to break down the services into items that our customers would also understand.
Terrific. Next question. Do you have the concept of a service owner or a services team that manages the service and the offerings?
So before I left, that was something that I was really trying to push with the operations team. When you kind of think about how we manage IT, we've definitely done it a lot from like that tower level, looking at things like, oh, this person helps manage a data center, but that's not necessarily the service, right? So there was definitely a big push to move towards a service owner, and we were using TBM to kind of help that journey along.
Outstanding. Were there any required trainings that you had to do across the IT organization or just within the teams themselves?
Sorry, Sorry, was that IT training?
Yeah, like specific to TBM training. Did you have to create trainings, webinars?
We did. So, and that's where I say, like, the training can vary. It just really depends on your audience. So, of course, there's great training that's out there offered through the TBM Council for the TBM executives, but we also did our own internal trainings.
This is a question.
Since we had a lot of lingo that was, obviously specific to our agency, we did develop some training that we gave for free just from our internal folks. And then, of course, the folks who were on my team either had taken the executive training, some others, took some training through Aptio, and in addition, a lot of it just came from hands-on work and, talking to other groups and individuals and just learning about it, through our daily jobs.
Terrific. Okay, we have a question from Kevin. He asks, is there a difference between your service portfolio in regards to your internal IT services structure and your services catalog, the services that you present out to the consumers?
So in my experience, I've almost always, seen it that way, just because, for example, if I'm looking at it from a TBM perspective, I'm looking at something like, a Salesforce license being, a platform as a service, but a customer is not going to understand that. They just know it as Salesforce. So you'll see some varying. I don't think I've seen anywhere where they've been exactly one-to-one, just because people either know things by a vendor name or as an internal application name rather than just what the basis of it is.
Okay, terrific. Kind of have a comment here in the Q&A box. Do you think it would be ideal or a great opportunity to maybe hold a 2 or 3 day event with your services team together and kind of have them focus around TBM and kind of help you build out that journey?
Oh, I'm sure it would be a good idea. I actually just, not to talk about another book, but just finished the Phoenix project. And so if you think about it, I mean, bringing all those different groups together where there are linkages, like, the whole DevSecOps things, and, you can throw out, how Agile came about, how all this stuff sort of comes about is getting the different folks in the room together that have a connection. So, yeah, that would definitely be an idea.
Great. I asked this question to Phil. I'll ask you, besides cost metrics, what are some other key metrics that you're tracking at the services layer?
So it's a good question. It's also a hard question. I always try to match my metrics to what our use cases were. So everybody always wants to say, we want to save money. And we know in a lot of cases that smart investments don't always save money per se. A lot of it might be like soft time. Like if you think about it, with the advent of like RPA and AI and all that sort of stuff, that stuff costs money, and you had people doing it before. So like there's some soft type like time savings there. So some of the metrics that we had been throwing around in the service layer really was linking it back to the business line and the capabilities. So knowing what your mission is, knowing what enables the company to keep moving, being able to attach your IT costs to that is definitely, I mean, it's a high maturity level for TBM, but that's where you're going to find probably the most bang for your buck.
Terrific. We'll do one more question. So what's the future for you? What are you looking to do in 2020?
Just, keep being a TBM evangelist and trying to continue to figure out how we can make things more transparent, especially, since I'm helping with the public sector doing that for our, taxpayers.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much, Megan. This was awesome stuff, and I really appreciate both you and Phil in your presentations. I did kind of want to make an announcement. We do have all of our past TBM webinars posted. I provided you a link there. If you actually want decks from those presentations and even the decks from today, just reach out to me, email me, and I'm happy to provide you access to those documents. It's been a pleasure hosting you today. And again, big thanks to both Megan and Phil. And we will talk to everybody again in 2 months. So with that said, take care and have a great day.